Y'all are crazy. The last 3 weeks it's been, whoa, really? But my name's Anthony Hewetson. I think I've done 1 or 2 talks for you people before. You folk, that's a nice way of putting it. I'm going to do this from the perspective. I say compiler and the user, technically I'm a reviewer and the user of eBird. I like compiler better because I figure I'm compiling data for long-term use. And there will be times during this presentation when I seem a little snarky. That's because I'm dealing with, and I'm not going to say amateurs, it's actually I have more trouble with the experts than the amateurs. As a reviewer, sometimes I get details that are less than satisfying, and I have a little moment to myself where I think snarky thoughts, and then when I'm done with the snarky thoughts, I go ahead and request additional details and maintain a polite demeanor throughout the rest of it. You, however, are going to get treated to some of my snarky thoughts towards the end, so you'll get a sort of an inside view of what is actually going through an eBird reviewer's mind when they're reviewing some of these records. So, see if this works. Technology rarely works for me. We'll see what happens. What do you know? There you go. I've been birding since I was 20. That means I've got 40 plus straight years of making fewer and fewer identification errors, which is now transitioning to the ones where I make errors because I'm old. So I was going uphill and now I'm going to start going downhill. My main claim to fame is as a paid field biologist with 10 years of evaluating habitats and estimating populations of everything from cavity-bearing trees to moose, with a specialty in birds. And what that means is I know a lot of different ways to count things. So if you ever need training in how to count stuff, I might be your guy, but I'm not volunteering for anything unless Sherry twists my arm.
Just tell me what you need.
So what is eBird? And this is, I'm going to give you the extremes here so you'll understand kind of what we're dealing with. From some users' perspective, it's a free record-keeping service to any level of geographic level for birders at any skill level, which should be provided with no obligation to provide supporting data. It exists to serve the observer. Okay, that's one end. There aren't a lot of people like that, but there are a few. Okay. At the other end, which is the view that some eBird reviewers hold, it's an error-free record thanks to flawless vetting by eBird reviewers of bird sightings throughout the world that can be used to generate absolutely reliable research results. Naturally, there is some tension. This is when a reasonable understanding of Buddhist teaching comes into play, the middle way. You're not going to get either of those. You need to sort of look at it as a trade. If you're going to contribute observations and you're going to use it as a free record-keeping service, and there's a lot of other ways you can use eBird. You owe eBird something, and that's best faith effort to provide details that will allow reviewers to review your records and either invalidate them or validate them. At the other end, there's no such thing as error-free science. What there is less than 5% error science. And I think eBird definitely falls into that category, and that's about as good as it gets. So, I'm just going to kind of skip around, and I'm not going to be able to do, eBird doesn't like you to do demos using eBird, which is weird, I don't know why. You have to use their standard packet, which is for advanced birders, so I'm not going to do that. But what I'm going to say is any observer at any skill level can just go into eBird and you can set up an account. They've made setting up an account very intuitive. And I'm not using intuitive from the way an IT person uses it. I'm using it the way a normal person uses it. You can actually figure it out without knowing anything about IT. Phone apps are a little bit trickier than PC. I do everything on PC, which is frustrating to some reviewers because if I'm on a long trip, they're not going to get my stuff for 2 weeks because I'm not entering anything on the phone. I mess things up when I enter things on the phone. Some best practices when you're entering data, and I'll revisit these, but I'm going to mention something now. One of the most important things is to use existing hotspots if they already exist. It makes it a lot easier to analyze the data if an existing hotspot, everybody's reports are funneled into that rather than some researcher having to collapse a whole bunch of extraneous data into the hotspot. And when you go into eBird, you'll understand what hotspots are. A start time, the length of route, length of observation, the number of observers, the number of species seen, even the common species or the uninteresting species during the entire visit. And you'll notice I put an asterisk by length of route. You want to use non-overlapping route length. So if you have a 5-mile hike, 2.5 miles out, 2.5 miles back, your route is 2.5 miles long, okay? Because it helps them when they calculate data. So like I said, use existing hotspots if possible, rather than creating your own hotspots. Do not double count mileage, I just talked about that. Do not double count birds. So I'm doing my little 2.5-mile walk. I get 7 blue jays on the way out, I get 11 blue jays on the way back. Unless I'm absolutely positive these are different blue jays, I'll report 11 blue jays, not 18. Does that make sense? If a species is flagged due to rarity, you need to submit as full a description of the bird as can be provided. And here's the important part, taking care to rule out similar species. Photographs and/or recordings are considered supplemental. Sometimes you can get away with a photograph or recording if it's really good and crystal clear and it's not going to cause a reviewer a lot of stress trying to review it. Details are always nice. There are some birds that have particular behaviors that will help cinch an identification. For instance, if you get into impids, which are Impidinax flycatchers, there's only one species of Impidinax that slowly brings its tail in and then pops it up. That's the gray flycatcher. All the rest of them go like this. It takes a while of observing them, but when you get to that, as far as is known, if you can show that, if you can say, describe that distinct tail pumping behavior, gray flycatcher, and that's actually going to do you a lot better with impids than any number of photographs will do. If a species is flagged due to number, and this confuses people, you need to still provide a description. Yeah, you're being challenged because you saw 18 cattle egrets instead of 15, but the reviewer still needs to know that you are counting cattle egrets. So you're going to have to provide a description of the birds as well, an explanation of how you count it. Once a report is flagged, so once a reviewer has gotten in touch with you and said, we need more details, you have 2 weeks to provide the requested detail or the report of that species is automatically invalidated and will not appear in eBird. This is not done by the reviewer. I would sit on them back in the old days, I would sit on them for 6 weeks before I finally said, well, you haven't submitted anything and you're gone, but now they've been cut off at 2 weeks. eBird itself takes care of that. So if you've ever submitted a record to me and 4 weeks later you finally put the photograph in and you had to redo it all over again, that's why. What does invalidation mean? Well, it doesn't affect your record keeping. The species is still going to show up in your report for your purposes. It's still going to show up on your county list, your state list, or whatever. It's just not going to show up publicly. And if a researcher goes in the data to use your report and they see an invalidated next to a particular species, they're probably not going to use that data because they're counting on the eBird reviewer having done a good job of vetting the report. And if the eBird reviewer didn't like it, chances are pretty good they're not going to like it. In my experience, like I said, researchers tend to not use records that were invalidated by eBird reviewers. And by the by, this will be a short presentation. I'm going to leave a lot of room for questions at the end because I've not done this one before, so I didn't have a lot of slides prepped. So how's the data analyzed? Jillions of different ways. A lot of them are really, really statistically rigorous and complicated. I probably wouldn't understand them anymore because I haven't done biology in so long. But the simplest way to look at it is number of species, number of birds of a species seen per unit time or unit distance. Over time, this can be used to generate maps that are somewhat representative of density, though there are some biases that come into play. How is density represented? If you go into eBird and you pick a particular species, I'm going to pick red-necked phalarope and I'll have a couple slides. As you zoom in, quadrants become apparent. The quadrants are graded from white to very dark purple. White means the species has not been recorded in that quadrant during whatever time frame you picked. Dark purple means that the species is abundant. Zooming in further gets you to specific sites within each quadrant. So this is red-necked phalarope, and they've done some stuff to make this really not useful for slide. I've chosen year-round, all years. So this is the total distribution of red-necked phalaropes in the western 2/3 of the United States. You'll notice they're primarily a bird of the Pacific coast. You'll also notice that there's some spots in Texas where they've shown up, mostly light purple, which means uncommon, rare to uncommon. Got some quadrants where they've never shown up. That could be lack of observer effort, or it could just be there's no water there. But that kind of gives you the big picture. Now you'll notice if I picked like say the last 10 years, say November through February, that would allow me to map the winter distribution of the species. And then if I did March through, say May, that gives me the spring distribution, so spring migration, so on and so forth. This is increasingly being used by people who produce field guides to produce more accurate range maps, things that actually match the distribution of the species. So when you start seeing some of the newer field guides, if they bother putting any out, this is also essentially replaced field guides for a lot of people, so you might not be seeing field guides in the future. The range maps are going to become more accurate. So if you zoom in a little further, you'll notice the local records here. There's a moderately purple quadrant here and here. So it looks like they've been picked up a couple of times, and now I've gone to August during the past 10 years. I've changed my time frame, and you can do that really easily, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So I just want to know where I would look for a red-necked phalarope in August, and during the last 10 years. I'm not really interested in historical data if I'm trying to figure out where to look for something, because for various reasons, including climate change, including habitat disturbance, including population disturbances, the ranges of birds have shifted. So anything older than 10 years ago, I just don't consider reliable for making current plans. And if I zoom in even further, got a spot here and a spot here. You'll notice this is it's just a blue cone, nothing exciting. That means in this representation, that is a person's personal spot. They've changed that to make it so that blue is just historical, but we know this isn't historical because I picked the last 10 years. And you'll notice this has a little flame in it. That's a hot spot. That's what we used to call the Smyer playa. It's currently off limits, so too bad. These are also sort of misrepresentations. This should be a very, very pale blue thing with no blue in it. Same thing here, because it makes it look like they're common there. But what happened is somebody found a red-necked phalarope here, and about 16 people went to look at it. Kind of artificially made the species look a little denser than it is. Same thing happened here, except some more along the lines of 20 people went to look at it. Again, it kind of artificially increases the perceived density. So, analysis, user-based problems. So, one of them is refusal to list common or uninteresting species. It generates data that is not reflective of true abundance. We will call this list building. So suppose you're working on your Lubbock County list, and somebody finds a palm warbler at McKenzie Park, and you go look at the palm warbler, and the only thing you put in is your palm warbler. That's list building. And it kind of irritates reviewers because we look at that and we know you saw some other stuff. You just didn't bother to put it in. So you're there for 45 minutes and you didn't bother to include the common stuff. And that's all right, you can do that. But from my perspective, you're not paying your dues. If you're there, list all the common species to anything you can identify, put it in there, and it just generates a lot more useful data. This is exacerbated when observers flock to an area to observe a true rarity and don't report other birds seen, which leads to artificially low density of common species and artificially high density of the rarity. An extreme example, thousands of observers, literally thousands, 3,600 people at least, came to Lubbock to look at a gyrfalcon. Hundreds of these observers reported the gyrfalcon to eBird. The vast majority of these observers reported only the gyrfalcon, or maybe a few other species that they thought were exciting and would build their lists. If you go into eBird and you look up gyrfalcon, you are going to see a dark, dark, dark purple quadrant centered on Lubbock, which leads you to the erroneous conclusion that gyrfalcon is one of the most common species in our area, and also, worse for my assistant, that a host of vastly more common species are actually relatively rare in the region. So that's a really good reason to submit all your stuff so you don't get things like that. You'd still get it anyway because 800 people reporting a gyrfalcon eBird is going to produce a dark purple spot. When you're planning trips and you have a big old list of species that have been seen somewhere and one of them is a true rarity, just delete that from your list because that's what happened. It showed up once, hundreds of people went to see it, you're not going to find it, okay, because it went away 18 years ago. Reviewer-based problems, you've got flagging that's set too tightly or too loosely. So reviewers can set the flags. If I want to, I could set the flag for blue jay in Lubbock County to 0. That would mean every single blue jay. Every single blue jay that people saw would flag, and I would have to review the record, which would be a lot of work for me, so I'm not gonna do that. That would just be a jerky thing to do. That'd be too tight. Alternatively, I could just say, well, so many people saw that gyrfalcon, I'm just gonna set the flag for gyrfalcon at 1, so I don't ever have to look at historical gyrfalcon record again. That would be setting it too loose, because then somebody might report a gyrfalcon today, not way back when, and it would slip through without getting reviewed. So you gotta set your filters adequately. Lack of coordination between reviewers leads to what seems like to observers inappropriate flagging. I'll give you an example of that I just encountered. So driving eastward through North Texas, Sherry and I encountered 3 counties in a row where yellow-throated vireo did not flag. And then 2 counties in a row where it did flag, and then never again. Now, presumably, as you drive from west to east, with the yellow-throated vireo being an eastern species, it's going to become increasingly more common. That doesn't make sense. Consequently, we did not take pictures or a recording of the yellow-throated vireos we saw in those intermediate 2 counties because it just didn't seem like it was important. It would have been helpful if the reviewer to the west flagged the species, or the reviewer in the middle loosened the flagging, but either of those would require coordination on the part of eBird reviewers, and the fact of the matter is we do not have enough eBird reviewers right now to get that level of coordination. Nor do we have regularly organized meetings that would encourage us to do that. And I'm gonna tell you right now, a lot of eBird reviewers are even more curmudgeonly than I am, which means they don't socialize well, and I just don't, coordination isn't there. I don't see when it's gonna happen.
So Anthony, on that, would it not be possible that there was some habitat
No.
that changed things and
It could be, but in our case, it wasn't. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I'm
yellow-throated
sure
vireo
I'm
habitat.
saying.
It was just that reviewer is particularly picky about his vireos for some reason, who knows. So how observers use the data? Well, obviously you can use it to store your sightings. You can use it to store your sightings at any level you think of. Hotspots, personal sites, counties, states, larger regions. So if you're a lister, this will keep your lists for you, free of charge. You can also use it in your daily activities, so you can see how likely a sighting is to be accurate. Suppose you think you found a rarity. You can go into eBird and you can pick that species and you can zoom into your region, pick the appropriate month. Last 10 years would be good because that will get you to more accurate recent data. And if you're in the middle of a sea of purple, it's probably okay. If you're in the middle of a sea of really, really light purple with a whole bunch of white holes, maybe not so much. Maybe if there's nothing there, you've got something that's, well, it's gonna get flagged for sure, okay? And you're gonna have to submit some details. Some people who are really good with their phones can do that on the fly. So if they're in an unfamiliar region and they think they've got something good, they can do it on their phone on the spot. And if it is a rarity, they can put some extra effort into getting a photograph or a recording, which is nice, but not essential. You can also use it to plan trips and similar activities. And you can use it to generate checklists for a region, a county, even an individual hotspot, and those checklists can be right down to a barcode that will give you how scarce to abundant they are for any given period. So I've done that right here. This is, and I'm sorry if the print is hard to read, they've made it as hard as possible. Reagan County, August 2016 through 225. I'm planning a trip to Reagan County in August, so I want to know what I'm going to be able to find. And this is going to be every species that's been seen, every species that's been seen in August during the last 10 years. It's also going to have all the other dates. But you can see some of the bars are very thick, some are very thin, some are almost not there, like that dot right there. That means accidental. This means casual, rare. You work your way up to uncommon, common, and abundant. So if I were going there in August, I'm going to go there first week of August. I'm not even paying attention to most of these. I might look at ruddy duck. It looks like it's possible. Blue-winged teal is possible. Collared dove seems like a certainty. White-winged dove seems like a certainty. Mourning dove. Greater roadrunner should be a certainty based on its annual distribution, but they go into molt at a weird time of year, so they can get kind of skittish and hard to find in certain seasons. And so on and so forth. I can just work my way down. Not too likely to see lesser nighthawk, but I've got a pretty good shot at common nighthawk. That could come in handy if I see a nighthawk and I'm wondering which one it's more likely to be. and you can use this to generate lists. Be warned, if you try to print these out, you are not contributing to the ecology in a significant way, because it prints about from here to here per page. I just generated my own list in an Excel spreadsheet because I can print out like a 30-page list in 4 pages, and it's a lot. I also learned by doing the work, so. Now, that was at the level of Reagan County. One of the hot spots in Reagan County is Reagan North County Park, and I can do the same thing for the hot spot. You'll notice that here I made it all the way from doves down to swallows, so I'm about halfway through the checklist. Obviously, there are going to be fewer species at any particular hotspot than there are for an entire county, but I can use this to look at the various hotspots and decide which ones I want to visit during a particular trip. Because if I've already got most of these, the county, and I'm just trying to do some county listing, I'm probably going to try to find another alternative. So how in general? So you've got your eBird thing. You're going to go into eBird. You're going to click on Explore. And then from there, you've got 1,000 things to do. It's about, and like I said, it's very intuitive. I very rarely run into any trouble on the PC where I can't figure out what to do next. Sometimes on the phone, I get a little confused. So for some of these things I did, I clicked on species map. I entered the species. I zoomed into my location to see how likely a sighting is, or I could explore hotspots, enter a place name. I could enter the particular hotspot, or I could enter a county name, and it will bring up all the hotspots for that county. And I can click on them individually. I can look at the data, I can create bar charts. There are literally hundreds of other ways to explore the data. I'm not interested in many of them, but I mean, field trip leaders can be interested in some other ways. Obviously, researchers can be interested in others. The good thing about Explore, list bar charts for site, county, region, using the date range. So here's where that date range thing, you can go where you can create list bar charts for a particular set of months, even a set of months across a given set of years. So I just did that. I did a bar chart for the county restricted to the month I was going to be visiting the county, with data restricted to the last 10 years, giving me a fairly solid idea of what I might reasonably encounter. Caveat: if you are in the western half of Texas, most of what I just said is pollution, okay? Why? Because we don't get rain like normal people, okay? So if you've got a whole bunch of ducks that have been seen in August in Reagan County, and it's 2011, you can just wipe all those ducks off the list. You're not gonna see ducks in Reagan County in 2011. If it was that year when we got 13 inches from a hurricane, and the entire western half of Texas flooded, put those ducks back on your list. So kind of bear in mind, you're gonna have to check with local weather conditions over the last couple of years. A place that Sherry and I are thinking of going to is Pecos County. Ducks were off our list until this last round of storms. Drainage thing that has not seen water in a decade is now so full of water they think they're not gonna get shorebirds this year, and it's just crawling with ducks. So I put the ducks back on the list of things we might see. So you can't just do all this from eBird. You also have to pay attention to weather conditions and everything else that's going on. Also be advised that some of the hot spots are not publicly accessible. And it will tell you that. It will say restricted access. Don't give up. Look it up online. If it's a sewage pond, find out if they've got open periods. If it's the Davis Mountains Resort, check your wallet, see if you're rich. You can rent a cabin there. They've got places you can rent. They've got Airbnbs. If you're not rich, you're just gonna have to give up on those swimming bridge. You're gonna have to find them somewhere else. But restricted access is like everything else. I've worked my way through restricted access onto golf courses, sewage ponds, portions of parks that are technically closed, but for the right observer, somebody who's going to be submitting lists to them, somebody who's going to be generating data for them, sometimes they'll let you in and do stuff, okay? Explore mode is very safe. A lot of us are kind of nervous when we get into something like this. We're afraid we're going to break stuff. I've actually encountered people who are afraid they're going to break eBird. You are not going to break eBird. People have tried to break eBird on purpose and they have failed so far. Even from entering your own data, you're not going to break eBird because they've got ways if you start messing around. Like if you enter a bunch of zoo data, people do that. They enter all the birds they saw at a zoo. contact, it's gone. Okay, you hardly even see that anymore. So you can explore safe, in explore mode, you're very safe. You can explore it all you want. You can find all sorts of neat ways to use it, things that I probably haven't even thought of. As soon as you go into your account to start entering data, however, you need to be a bit more careful, only to prevent messing up your data. Okay, so learn how to use that correctly and use it correctly and you'll be all right. The good news is most of the time, if you do something stupid like lose your data, it can be recovered. There's a 7-day catch on this, and if you contact the eBird people, they can go and they can retrieve data, but they're not going to do it for particularly large data sets. So I'm going to go ahead and create a list. May Simmons Park. I'm going to click on the existing hotspot at May Simmons Park, even if I wasn't right on the red dot. I want the data from the whole park to go to that red dot. 21st of July, some random year, start time 8:05 a.m. Note it's the 21st of July, so that's the time of year. That tells you what's sort of happening that time of year. Distance is 1.21 miles. We actually walked 1.82 miles, but 0.61 were retracing previously walked routes, so I deducted that. Length of observation, 1 hour and 55 minutes, number of observers 2. Now the number generated for each species, that's the next page. This is a short fake list that I designed to illustrate a couple of points. It's a ridiculously short list for that site. But I had 14 white-winged doves, 6 collared doves, 2 coots, a semi-palmated plover that flagged for rarity, 18 yellow-crowned night herons that flagged for number, 14 black-crowned night herons, 4 Mississippi kites, downy woodpeckers, 6 blue jays, a Carolina wren, 12 American robins, 13 common grackles, and a partridge in a pear tree. Nice, cool. So everything's cool, except I got a couple of things that have flagged, and sooner or later the reviewer is going to get in touch with me and say, give me data, give me some details. And once they've done that, my stuff's going to disappear, not for me, but for the rest of the world in 2 weeks. I've got till they contact me to start worrying about that. But once I enter the list, eBird flagging, did these 2 things. This is where, in my opinion, observers, as good citizens, should be paying for the free storage of their data, not their data, sorry, and their ability to use eBird data in oh so many ways. You're getting something. It's nice, it's a fantastic tool, it's tremendously useful, tremendously informative. It makes your life so much better in so many ways, like when you're planning trips, you know where to go, whether you can visit there, blah, 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 blah. So you pay for it by providing requested details when they're requested. That just seems like a fair trade to me. Compilers don't want to ask for additional data, and for the most part will not do so if adequate details are provided from the start. So if your thing flags, just put the details in. If they're good enough details, you're never going to hear from the reviewer. Most reviewers will not invalidate a record without contacting you first. So if you didn't give enough details, you'll hear from them. But take a shot at it, see what you can do. Occasionally there are observers that they will fall onto blacklists, and I'll talk about that a little way down the road. It's easier and faster to just provide the requested details than it is to do what I call the dance. The dance, you put in a record, you don't provide the details. I get in touch with you, ask for the details, you send me some bad details, I say I need better details, this goes back and forth and back and forth. Waste of everybody's time. Could have saved a lot of time just by doing it to start with. And this is coming from a guy who does not believe in compliance. Trust me, do not believe in compliance. On the other hand, the dance, if you do it with someone a few times, if they don't make a habit out of it, if they eventually come around and start doing it, but the first few times they do it, it can actually produce better observers because they get a better idea on what they're supposed to do, okay? So this is the fun part of the presentation for me, is eventually I get to talk about some of the more amusing experiences I've had as a compiler. So, species flags for rarity. Suppose I got a great photograph of the semi-palmated plover. I could probably get away with attached photographs should suffice for identification, especially since I'm the reviewer. Why do I review my own stuff? Critically. Sometimes I'll look at one of my things and say that's probably not enough. For posterity's sake, somebody will be looking at this in the future, and probably when I'm not even alive anymore. I need to have dotted my I's and crossed my T's and all that to make sure that the data is usable in the future. If the eBird reviewer asks for more details, I'll provide them. If I have a recording of the semi-palmated plover, I might be able to get away with a cropped recording. And this is a big mistake people make with recordings. They do it to me with ring camera footage. They do it to me with sound recordings. I do not want to watch 18 minutes of ring camera footage for the 4 seconds that a rufous hummingbird was in the frame. Crop it. Just send me the stuff. I mean, just be realistic, folks. Same thing with sound recordings. I have a 32-minute recording, and somewhere in there, supposedly there is a common crane calling amidst the sandhill cranes. I did not listen to that recording. I sent a request for a cropped thing. They didn't comply, validate it. Even if I do have a good recording, I might, and I did see the bird as well, I'm going to provide some details about what I saw to bolster the recording. Chances are that I had neither. So this is like a really basic description. I'm not going to get into things like secondaries and tertials and primaries and rectrices and remiges and et cetera, et cetera. For a particularly rare bird, I might want to note that the scapulars were red with black rims, the secondaries were red with buff rims, et cetera, et cetera. So note, most field guides have illustrations of birds labeled to parts at the beginning of the guide. Use these terms when possible, particularly when you're describing a really rare bird. So my palmated plover is not that bad. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get it to group. Small plover, short stubbed off bill. Plovers are typically the shorebirds that have short, relatively short stubbed off bills. Foraging strategy typical of plovers. When plovers forage, they run a little bit, they peck, they run a little bit, they peck. Most shorebirds don't that, but most plovers do. And if you want to say plover, you can. I won't say you. Single black breastband, bright orange legs, short and stubby bill with orange base and black tip, dark brown above with dark brown capable, black mask from forehead to nape, white patch in forehead. I did not use a lot of technical details. Most of those terms have a technical name as well. I'm just using, lay words. Leg coloration, back color, color of cap, and bill coloration rule out immature killdeer. So I got it to group. I took it to plover. With a warbler, I'll often put in something like warbler size, shape, and proportions. They just have to trust me at that point that I know what that means, okay? But I'm saying this is how I got it to warbler. I'm going to provide details getting the bird to species. I provided as many details as I could to support semi-palmated plover. And then I provided details that ruled out similar species. And really the only similar species you're likely to see here is baby killdeer. Because baby killdeers have a single black band across their breast, and they are actually fairly common in July when this sighting occurred. I have seen this. I have seen photographs of baby killdeers submitted to me as semi-palmated plovers. I've never had it happen the other way around. I wish it would. So I ruled out immature killdeer as that can happen, and B, I am showing the reviewer that I'm aware that that can happen. When I include that, they have reason to suspect I actually know my birds a little better. I don't have to worry about that much in Texas, but like if I'm birding in Illinois, those people don't know me. They get harder. So ancient thrush size, shape, and proportions, dull reddish brown above, upper surface of tail no redder than the upper surface of the back, beige, not white tones to throat and eye ring, that rules out hermit thrush, both of those. Buffy tones in breast behind the dark spotting. So you have dark spots on the breast, there's a little bit of a buff wash behind it. That rules out gray-cheeked thrush. The distinct spotting on the breast is relatively dark, which rules out fury. So I took it to group, and I gave the details needed to rule out similar species. I've shown the reviewer that I know the similar species that could possibly pop up in the region while I was doing it. What about photographs? Photographs are tricky. We are all, a lot of us probably, how many of us are photographers? Take photographs of things in nature. How many of you do it with your cell phone? How many of you do it for iNap? Guess what? You're photographers. Okay. Everyone who's taking a picture of a bird wants that one shot. Perfect profile, centered on the eye, get a little light ring rolling off the eye, maybe destroy the color of the eye while you're doing it. You're aiming for that thing you're going to put on the magazine. Not going to happen with me, but with maybe a bird, right? That is not necessarily the shot you want. Each group of birds has an angle or angles for which shots are needed to be sure. This is where your experience comes in handy. You need to bird for a while before you know what shot you need. When you know what shot you need, sometimes you're going to have to work to get that shot. Sometimes the shot's impossible. For example, sorting out mallards, Mexican ducks, and mottled ducks. We have mallards here. We are getting more and more Mexican ducks, and we've had a few mottled ducks show up in the last 5 years. You want close-ups of the bill from the side, You want shots showing the upper surface of the tail and shots of the upper surface of the wing, preferably fully open. And you're like, oh, how likely is that to happen? Well, there's the shot bill from the side. You can see I've circled something there, and that little black ring around the base of the bill is inaccurately referred to as the gape. Mottled duck has a black gape. Mallards and Mexican ducks, it's yellow. So that helps clinch the idea. This bird, oddly enough, had a really good black gape on one side and a kind of deficient one on the other one, so I included this picture with my report. Oh, what do you know? I got that picture I wanted. It took a little while, I think about 80 shots before I got this. But what I got was, not only did I get my bird, all dark tail above, I got a nice shot of the wing, and I also got a mallard right here, and you can see on this thing, which is called a speculum for some reason that I do not understand. I teach anatomy, and that really disturbs me for a lot of reasons. The speculum has white borders in mallards, but in mottled ducks, it lacks the white borders. This is a clinching photograph, okay? This is either extraordinarily aberrant mallard or it's a good solid mottled duck, and a good solid mottled duck is a better call. It took a while, but I got the photo I wanted.
I like the nice touch of the crushed can.
Oh, well, yeah, you know, it's lovely. What about impids? So members of the genus Impidinax are tricky. You need a profile because you want the overall length of the primary projection. How many people know what primary projection is? All right, good, good. My ringer's over there. Primary projection is how far the primary feathers, the longest wing feathers, stick out beyond the secondaries. They give the bird, if you have really long primary projection, the bird will have a short-tailed look. If you have a really short one, the bird will have a long-tailed look, but you have to actually pay attention to not whether they're short-tailed or long-tailed, but actually how far the primaries are sticking out beyond the secondaries. But you also need a shot of an impid where you're looking up its nose, because from beneath, the bill shape is completely unique for each species. So if you can get a shot of the bill shape from beneath, you can rule it, and you've also got that side shot, you're gonna have a good shot at getting it accepted. So this not zoomed in picture, there are the secondaries, these are the primaries, they're going to about here. That is a moderate to long primary projection. And I'm gonna zoom in, you can see the bill a little bit. You can tell it's all orange below, that's helpful. You can tell that the bill is long and very broad-based. The only impid with that profile that has an all orange yellow bill and a bill of that shape is willow flycatcher. Even alder flycatcher is ruled out because it's a little bit narrower at the base and has just the slightest hint of dark at the tip. So you can actually get this down to willow flycatcher. But if you don't know the group of birds well, and you just get that perfect profile, and I get a lot of profile shots of impids, and I just have to say, I think we're gonna have to go with the impid species on this, particularly if the bird is in molt and you can't use primary projection. That's the shot you want. It can be even worse. Hutton's vireo versus ruby crown kinglet can look really similar, and in the winter when they're not being particularly vocal, you can't use vocalizations. I would have a Hutton's vireo in central Texas, a little bit further east than they're supposed to be. And it took me a while, but eventually I got a shot of the legs, because Hutton's vireos have gray toes and all the thing that's wrapped around a branch's toe. And ruby crown kinglets have bright orange toes. But I didn't, if I hadn't known that, I would not have gotten the right shot. The record probably would not have been accepted because it was a really drab vireo. And really drab vireo looks like a really drab kinglet. Short-billed dowitchers versus central long-billed dowitcher and breeding plumage. Short-billed dowitchers are very rare here, we think. No, but we think. Long-billed dowitchers are really common, and the one we have is the central long-billed dowitcher, which just happens to be the one that most resembles short-billed dowitcher. So when you see a dowitcher around here, you're really up against it. A great shot of the bird from beneath, or a frontal shot of a grounded bird, so if the bird's flying over, you can get a picture of it going straight up, or the bird's facing you and it goes like this, and you get a shot of the underwings. Short-bills have a white patch right here that only pops up in that particular view. In all the years that people have been sending me photographs, I have only seen that shot one time. Fortunately, they do sound different. And if you can get an adequate recording of them, sometimes vocalizations help. There are also some other things you can use, but you can start getting really technical details like edges of the tertials, edges of the secondaries. You have to start learning a lot of details about feathers. Species flags for number. So I've got to account for my identification and the number. Got 18 yellow-crowned night herons, so I'm just going to go 18 birds, a mixture of immatures and adults, counted singly, one at a time, at a known rookery. Reviewer is going to take a look at the map and go, oh yeah, there's a rookery there. That's a lot of yellow-crowned night herons for one spot, but this is a reasonable number for this spot. But were they yellow-crowned night herons? A lot of people would be like, explained how I counted it. Why you want details about what they look like? Because you might have just counted a bunch of black-crowned night herons. So adults are gray overall, yellowish white crown stripe and frond that sticks out behind. Black face surrounded in white cheek patch. Immatures dark below, finely spotted above with heavy all dark bills. Bill coloration, bill shape, and plumage ruled out immature black-crowned night herons. So I ruled out the only similar species. And if the reviewer doesn't want to accept it after that, well, that's all right, and I'm going to get to that. What about larger numbers? This is something that I might get. This is how I would submit this report. Roughly 50 flocks of white geese flew over during the hour of observation. Several flocks were sorted to species, suggesting that 10% of the birds were Rosses and 90% were snow geese. Flocks range in size from 17 birds counted singly to 250, estimated by tens. The total count of 3,650 birds was, based on estimated percentages, 365 Rosses geese and 3,285 snow geese. I hope my math is right. I'm doing a dry July, and I find it very difficult to work with numbers if I don't have bourbon. So we'll see, I've got even worse math later on. So that's pretty reasonable. You can count that many geese in an hour. I explained how I went about doing it. You can estimate by tens. Most people can estimate by tens. Some people can estimate by 50s, hundreds, 500s, thousands. You have to be trained when you start estimating by larger numbers. I will occasionally see reports of like 3,500,000 red-winged blackbirds. And that's not an unreasonable number in the plains, but I would like to know how they counted them. Okay, so that's reasonable. That should be probably getting accepted. Even larger numbers. This is something that comes from my work on the Pacific coast. Birds counted by 2 paid observers during a census of seabirds migrating northward as viewed from the promontory at the site. Birds were estimated by 500s, with each 500 recorded on a clicker. There's more to it because one of us clicked 800 and something times and one of us clicked 800 and something times, but the average was 817. 817 times 500 comes to 408,500 sooty shearwaters tallied during the count period. That was accepted. It kind of helped. This was historical data from like 4 decades ago. The eBird reviewer saw this probably first thing, 2 paid observers, so they knew we were working with a shorebird censusing team that year, and that was a pretty well-trained team. The same reviewer might not accept it from somebody who's not a trained observer. Which brings us to what happens if your record gets invalidated, or if they ask you for more details. Don't take it personally. That's my biggest advice. Don't take it personally. There's a good chance the reviewer doesn't know you. And B, even if they do know you, these details are needed for future re-review purposes. I generally trust a lot of things that come in from the majority of my observers, and I still want a written description, photographs, et cetera, so that somebody down the road, a researcher or another reviewer down the road who knows none of us, has a shot at reviewing the record. So, like I said, just provide the required data. It goes faster than going through the whole dance. All reports are subject to future review. It is easier to get details now than to try in the future. The absolute best birder in the region, I'm not going to name him, but he is absolutely the best birder in the region. Provides descriptions of birds and details regarding counting every single time of sighting flags. He provides details that rule in the observed species and rule out the similar species. He provides details regarding counting techniques when asked. His descriptions run to a minimum of 1 paragraph to up to 5 paragraphs, depending on the rarity of the bird. Sometimes he runs out the count limit. There's a character limit. He doesn't need to. I mean, he's well enough known and well enough regarded that even somebody 200 years from now is going to know who this person was and the records are going to be accepted, but he does it anyway. If he can do it, I figure anybody can do it. Probably should. So now for the anecdotes. We're going to start with the worst and we'll proceed on the assumption that you are getting to hear some of the inner dialogue, the stuff I say in my head, or sometimes out loud when I'm shouting at my computer, that the observer never gets to hear. That goes through my minute, and then politely request additional information. And you can put a smiley face there so you know I'm not an absolute jerk. Some observers feel that they are so good and so well known that they will submit the following: a period. This is particularly popular with the younger crowd. This is a bit of internet slang, period, nothing more to say. That's right, nothing but a period. Meaning to every eBird reviewer that no further details are forthcoming. This will get invalidated for every reason you can think of, and my internal monologue for these reports is unreviewed. I cannot think of actually I can. People get so worked up about eBird that there have been reviewers have had received death threats. Okay? But this is about as rude as it gets in the normal course of the day. A person reporting a Merlin in June, when Merlins are not here, perched on a fence post at the entrance to the state park. That was that's all the details I got. My inner dialogue, ground squirrel, spiny lizard. What? They haven't even established to my satisfaction that they saw a bird. So I requested further details, eventually got us to female American kestrel. I validated it, because that's a reasonable bird. But the observer kept doing it and doing it and doing it, and eventually they stopped responding to polite requests for additional details, and eventually I just invalidated anything of theirs that seemed wasn't worth doing the dance. They weren't interested, I wasn't interested, there's no benefit. Some observers feel the need to editorialize without providing details, so I'll get a comment like, this species is actually quite common at this site in the region at this time of year, so I am not providing details. Well, whoop-de-doo. That's my inner dialogue. Well, whoop-de-doo, okay. Flags are set at the county level. So let's take a red-headed woodpecker in Crosby County. There are 4 or 5 sites in Crosby County where red-headed woodpeckers breed. Multiple pairs of red-headed woodpeckers breed. You've got a volunteer activity coming up at one of them, Camp Rio Blanco. There are multiple pairs of red-headed woodpeckers breeding there some years. But the reviewer has to set it for the county. And aside from those 3 or 4 spots in Crosby County, if someone reports 6 red-headed woodpeckers, like at the Crosbyton Courthouse, I am going to want to know more, okay? Some species are expanding or contracting in the region. Cactus wren used to be fairly common in the region. We even had them in the eastern side of Lubbock. Cactus wren has disappeared from the region almost entirely. Bell's vireo used to be unheard of in the region. It's now expanding rapidly to the north and to the west. They are both flagged because as an eBird reviewer, part of my job is to track expansions and contractions. And yes, people get tired of writing details up for Bell's vireo, but until Bell's vireo are so well established in so many counties that they're just no longer of no interest at all, they're probably going to continue to be flagged. So reviewers can set flags for a variety of purposes. And it's like I said, it takes way less time to just do the details than it does to go through the whole thing. A person documenting an immature Mississippi kite in November. I am a very experienced observer with extensive experience with kites in Southeast Asia and Africa. The kites of Southeast Asia and Africa are not even in the same group. They don't have the same profile, they don't have the same flight profile, they're not the same size and shape. They don't forage the same way. So my inner dialogue is, this is not a description further than Mississippi kite, blah, blah, blah. The outcome, I requested additional details. They got snitty, they didn't provide the details. I validated the record. Didn't feel too bad about it because you're not going to see an amateur Mississippi kite in the region in November. I suspect that what they saw was a Cooper's hawk. They see Cooper's hawks and they don't get the full chiz as they're flying over and they boom, turn into a Mississippi kite. Person reporting 120,000 snow geese over the course of 5 minutes. And you could do that if you're good at estimating by hundreds or thousands. But their description was estimated by tens. So my inner dialogue, they counted 10 birds 12,000 times in 5 minutes. And then I said they counted 10 birds 2,400 times in 1 minute. They counted 10 birds 40 times per second. I've estimated similar numbers in 5 minutes by 500, and that was pushing it. And the reviewer knew that I had 10 years of professional censusing, gotta fix that. I couldn't talk them down from this, so I just invalidated it. Chances are it would have been accepted if they had said something rational, like estimated by thousands or estimated by, or their observation period a bit longer or whatever, but nah. Sometimes you just have to use common sense. Person reporting a common yellowthroat at a marsh that can only be viewed without trespassing from a 0.58 of a mile away. Single chip note, heard well from pad on county road. So they're telling me they heard it from the pad on the county road, 5/8 of a mile away. I'm gonna do a full volume chip note for common yellowthroat. Reasonable? Excellent. Minor dialogue, that is mutant level super hearing or trespassing on a site where I know the owners do not allow access to birders, so I just invalidated that one. Plus this observer has a well-known history of trespass. So I don't really like to collect data from people who trespass. Now for some good stuff, the positive interactions. These are the best, these are the reason that when I get a best faith effort, I'll reach out and work through it with an observer. Person reporting 18 song sparrows from a country yard, counted singly as they foraged on open ground, dark spots on breast without similar species, which isn't too bad, except for habitat is more appropriate for savanna sparrow. Some forms of which are very similar to song sparrow, including a dark spot on the breast, and song sparrows neither flock nor forage as groups in the region, and you're not likely to see song sparrows out in the open like that. Their response, they looked at their field guide and changed the identification to savanna sparrow. As a little tweak on me, they reported it as the particular form of savanna sparrow that has the dark spot, so I had to go ahead and go through the validation process, but that's okay. Any number of experienced observers submitting reports with no descriptions or justification of numbers with a statement that they're experienced observers. Again, well, what do you do? My response, and I'm usually glad, I appreciate that you may be an experienced observer, but I've not birded with you and I need details in order to review the report. For the most part, they provide without additional protest the needed details, and I can get on with your validating or invalidating the record. With time, eBird reviewers get familiar with the experience and skill levels of repeat submitters. So when I first took over the Panhandle, I didn't know anyone up in the Panhandle proper. But over time, I got to know the people who are submitting good stuff, the people who are just shaky, and the people who are learning. I've got to give credit to people who are learning. Their early eBird reports may be horrible, full of all sorts of errors, but if they're willing to work with you and they're actually studying their field guides and getting out, I expect birders to improve over time. So I don't lock in on those early observations to say, well, you submitted a bad report in 1972, so I'm done with you. That's not right. We still tend to request details from even the best observers, as this will help researchers in the future. This is one of my favorites. An observer submitted a photograph of an eastern bluebird but identified it as a lazuli bunting. My response, your photograph appears to be of an eastern bluebird. Please review your photograph, and if you concur, amend your report accordingly. Now, I'm a very polite reviewer, surprisingly. There are reviewers who are less polite. Don't take it personally. Some people are very blunt. I'm gonna be honest, I think a lot of eBird reviewers are probably on what they call the spectrum, and they don't have a lot of I'm personally on the spectrum, but I've worked really hard to gain limited interpersonal skills. Some people don't put in the work, and they can be really blunt, but don't take it personally. If you go ahead and submit the details, they're probably gonna review the record. Their response was, thank you, I just moved here from somewhere out west, and eastern bluebird is a lifer. Can't get better than that, right? They went from having something they'd seen lots of to something that was a lifer for them. That's like the best possible outcome. That dot, just the period, that's the worst possible outcome. And that's the end of that. Now, do people have questions? And I hope you have questions, because people wonder about the inner workings. People wonder about the inner workings of eBird, and some things I can tell you and some things I can't. So if you've got questions about it.
Is there a limit to submit your observations?
No, actually, because eBird started, I don't know, I guess about 15, 18, 20 years ago. I've submitted everything I've ever done except for foreign trips all the way back to 81. My first was a California gnat catcher that I saw in Southern California while I was on a herping trip with my uncle, and a girl I really liked was into birds, and she pointed it out to me, and I wrote it in my field book, and that got accepted because the sighting was there. But yeah, you can enter historical data. Sometimes you have to, it's disappointing because you have to provide details and you just have to say, sorry, it was like 32 years ago, and they just invalidate it, but that's life, it's still on your list. I mean, and if the species it just ends up showing a history of being there, like like in that period of time, it might actually get validated. For example, Fort Huachuca in New Mexico used to have a magnificent sewage ponds. Just fantastic. Wall to wall, ducks and coots and grebes and shorebirds. And then they switched to the covered one. The new eBird reviewer, very young fella, nice guy, but very young fellow, had no knowledge of the history. So when I submitted all my historical records, he's like, yeah, all of those filters are set at 0 because we don't get water birds. And I explained the sewage ponds. I said, you need to go, I think you got a local Audubon chapter, take a look at the field notes from way back when, and you'll notice you used to just, and he ended up validating all of my stuff, and also a bunch of other historical records because people hadn't gotten back to him. He made that request to a bunch of people, and I was the only one who bothered to explain the situation to him, and he was able to just go ahead and validate a whole bunch of records, which was kind of cool. But don't go there now expecting to see any of those birds. Use that 10-year time frame, because you're not gonna find a coot there anymore. That's the way it goes. What else you got for me? Anything?
So if you've got your own place and you're just trying to,
What's that?
if you've got your own place and you're trying to record birds on eBird for your own, how often should you do that? Like weekly? I
If
mean,
you're doing,
trying to keep records of.
well, you know, I mean, if you're just trying to record birds on your property, I generally spend, I do what I call casual birding, and that's one of the ones you can select, where I just pay attention to birds for 2 or 3 hours a day, 2 or 3 times a week, and I just enter that in there. And over time, I've gotten, I think, well over 140 species of birds in my yard. But most weeks, it's like, you know, 11, 13, 14 species in any given day. It takes a long time. But you can, as often as you want, I would say, probably try not to do any routes longer than 5 miles. And probably try not to do any sessions longer than 3 hours, because there's talk of restricting the data in that way in the future. Because, like, if I do a 35-mile route, it's not tremendously informative in letting the reviewer know where anything was seen. Now, on the other hand, I did an 80-mile route in Canada, and the guy was ecstatic. He said, you're the only person who's ever recorded birds on this road. And I mean, it was so great to know that there were 16 common ravens on this stretch of road, because I think that's what it was. I had a pair of ravens every 4 miles. So he accepted it, even though it was cross provinces. So I was trying to cross the border between provinces. He still made an exception to get that in there. You're not going to see that in the United States probably, but you know, more far-flung regions. But you can do as many as you want. So like if you wanted to bird your yard, and you just start a new list every hour, you could do a report from 8 to 9, a report from 9 to 10, a report from 10 to 11, so on and so forth. Or you could just say, I was in my yard gardening for 3 hours and this is what I saw. That'd be casual or incidental reporting. There's all sorts of ways to do it.
Do you
Anything
have
else?
to do descriptions for everything, or is it just the ones that get flagged?
Just ones that get flagged.
And they can get flagged, like recently I was out and birds that we may have at other times, but it was early, they showed up early, so I actually had to, luckily I got pictures of most of them, but I also had to write up a description, because they're like 2 weeks early.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing too, like with Christmas bird counts. In Muleshoe, we had to document Eurasian collared doves, because they just showed up there for the first time for when Christmas bird counts did.
Whereas you would not have to obviously document Eurasian collared doves on the Lubbock Christmas bird count. If we didn't get Eurasian collared doves on the Lubbock Christmas bird count, the compiler would probably say, what happened to your Eurasian collared doves?
So if birds are nesting, do you just kind of?
There are, okay, yeah, so there's nesting codes you can use as well. So like suppose I've got a curve-billed thrasher in my yard, well 2, and they've got 3 nestlings. I'll put down 5 curve-billed thrashers, and then I can select 1 adult male, 1 adult female, 3 nestlings. Or 1 adult male, 1 adult female, 3 fledglings. And then there's a breeding code you can enter where it gives you the different things of breeding. You can say, like for instance, parents feeding young in nest, etc., etc. All the way down to like parents feeding fledglings or eggshells found, things that are a little bit less conclusive about whether the breeding actually took place there. Why might you find curve-billed eggshells in your backyard? Because when the eggs hatch, they take the eggshells away and drop them somewhere else, so predators won't see that color. So, you know, you don't have nesting in your yard, but you found eggshells, and they have curve-billed thrashers. So,
I have pieces of a nest. Is it possible to reconstruct it? Maybe it's probably.
eBird doesn't let you do nests. They don't like, so like the eggshells I was talking about, you'd have had to have a curved thrasher in your yard because they don't let you do eggs. They also don't let you do dead birds because the theory is they might have been carried there by a truck, like, you know, common pool got hit by a semi here and it got transported here before it finally fell off. I'm like, well, if the bird's still flapping, don't go too crazy with that, but I mean, obviously a lot of times, like if you find a dead bird in the middle of a trail somewhere, really an eagle carried it, dropped it, it's just far more likely the bird died right where you found it. So that's sort of between you and your God.
And there is stuff about provenance with some of the rarities we're seeing in
Yeah,
rural
like,
areas.
there's a hooded crow in
Galveston or
Galveston or something right now. Hooded crows they really like hanging around at ports, and they really like anything, they're crows. So if you got a ship full of like, tasty stuff, they might fly into the hold of the ship and then they get transported across the Pacific through the Panama Canal, they end up in Corpus or wherever, Galveston, and they're like, yay, freedom, and then everyone's getting excited about a hooded crow in Galveston. I think that was probably ship-assisted bird. They're native to like Asia, so, and they're not migratory, so not likely.
Did you see the discussion on text birds this week about AI?
AI, yeah.
Photographs?
Don't use AI on your photographs. And I'm not talking about cropping. I'm not talking about typical photographic tools. Like if you want to brighten, if you've got a bird that you took in shade and you want to brighten a little bit, or you want to increase the contrast a little bit, that all falls within reasonable bounds. But if you just, you go to Claude or Grok or whoever, and you say, make this bird look pretty, it will make the bird look pretty, but it might blend different birds together. So we're starting to get images of things that were obviously cobbled together by AI, and as AI gets better, it's not going to make those mistakes anymore. And we're eventually not going to be able to tell the difference between AI-generated photographs and legitimate photographs, so just don't use AI to substantiate a rarity. There's probably going to be no way to police it down the road, but right now it's hard for us to look at anything online or probably on the TV or even in newspapers without encountering some AI-generated stuff. You can run. We have been running photographs through an AI detector. We also run photographs through a stock detector. So that'd be like someone takes a picture of a bird in the sky, so there's absolutely no context whatsoever. Did they really photograph the bird where they said they photographed it, or are they just kind of spoofing us? Believe it or not, a stock detector, it will look at every single image of, say, magnificent frigate bird that has ever been put on the internet, and it will tell you whether it's a duplicate. And it takes about 15 seconds. I had to do that because that exact thing happened up at Lake Theo at Cap Rock Canyon. Not exactly where you'd expect to see a magnificent frigate bird. Someone got this beautiful picture of a magnificent frigate bird shooting straight up, so it's frigate bird, sky. I ran it through that and it said it was not a duplicate of anything that had ever been put on the internet before, so I was able to just go ahead and validate it, but I did run that. And there are similar things you can do right now to run for AI. I have to use an AI thing at where I work to teach medical students anatomy, and they have papers, so I have to run those all through a AI detector. And now we've started doing a keystroke thing where we run, they actually look at the thing and can tell how the keystrokes are generated. So like when you're typing a paper, you type a sentence and then you think for a bit, and then you type a sentence and you think for a bit. AI doesn't do that. Tappity, 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 tap for 3 pages. If I get a paper that was tappity, 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 tappity for 3 pages, I'm gonna ask the student, did you make this paper or did you get a little help from somebody? So there are ways of detecting this stuff now, but in the future probably not. So just don't do it. It's gonna come down to people behaving, oh God, people behaving properly. So, any others?
What's your opinion on, I see binoculars advertised, you look at the bird with binoculars, then identifies it.
The binocular itself identifies it?
Yeah, it's
Wow.
God, what do they call it? Large language learning module, blah, blah. It's an AI thing, and it's accurate. I don't like it. You're not learning anything. I have similar reservations about iNam. Because a lot of people use iNet very passively. They'll take a picture of something, they'll get it ID, they put it in their book, but they don't really learn how to identify it for themselves. They don't learn why it is what it is. So you can use iNet passively, which is I'm sort of against, or you can use it actively, like, okay, so this is Williams Meadow Rue, and you can hopefully read the description and you learn why it's Williams Meadow Rue instead of one of the 1,500 other species of meadow rue out there. If you're just doing, now on the other hand, if you're using it as a tool to create a list for a place and you don't have time to learn everything, that's cool too. But if you're actually trying to go out there and claim you know something about meadow rues, you don't, unless you're actually learning the stuff. So there's a difference between passive and active learning. So that's my answer to your question. Probably not satisfactory. I wouldn't use them. I saw another hand going up.
Do you do for local stuff, want us to post to the listserv, even if we eBird, you still want us to send it to? the
Yeah,
eBird?
like, so if you're not an eBirder and you see something cool, get on our listserv and put it there because, well, actually, even if you are an eBirder, if you see something you think is cool, put it on the listserv because, like, you see a lot of neat stuff. You see a lot of neat stuff. Like, you might have a list of 25 species, but not a single one of them flags. I will never see that list. There's no reviewer out there who's looking at every list that is generated in their region. I'm only going to see the lists where things are flagged. So if one of your things flagged, all 8 cool things you saw will make it into the newsletter. But if nothing in your list flagged, none of the 8 cool things you saw will make it in the newsletter because I never had any way of knowing it existed. If you put in a bad
list server, if you're out in the field and you see a really neat bird, you can put it on list server right then and there. Everybody knows
Yeah.
it's there. If you want to do it with the eBird, depending on how people set up eBird, it may be hours later before they see it. That bird's long gone.
And another misconception about eBird is that we're somehow catching all the errors. So like somebody takes a picture of an eastern bluebird, and they put it in as a lousily bunting. Well, lousily bunting doesn't flag in the region for some periods. I will never see that photograph because both species are regular during a certain month, so it's not gonna flag, so I'm not gonna see the photo. And then somebody will chime in, and one of the photo reviewers will chime in. People get onto eBird and they review photos and say, how this observer didn't notice this obvious error is beyond me. I'll be like, that's because you don't know how eBird works, chum. I didn't see it. If I'd seen it, I probably would have caught it, but I didn't see it, so I didn't catch it, so.
And give an example of just how many reports are in your queue in a
When I was
given day or
doing the
week?
Panhandle in this region, so I was doing 26 plus 41 counties, which is a record for Texas, and it's been split up amongst 3 people since then, which is great. When I took it over, the eBird reviewer before had fallen down on the job for a couple years, and there were 5,500 things that I had to review in my queue. And then regularly, since I got that down to 0, I have, if I had like a busy month at work or whatnot, it gets up to several hundred or 500, and then I have to attack them. But now I've got Mark Lockwood is reviewing for the region, Jennifer Miller's reviewing for the region, I'm reviewing for the region. I'm not gonna name counties, so you can't get mad at any particular person, but we got it divided up amongst 3 different people. And fortunately for me, Mark Lockwood is retired and is really enthusiastic about eBird reviewing and is basically cleaning the plate for us almost every day. But sometimes I think he goes on a trip for a couple days and I have actually 50 or 60 pile up in the queue.
I'm really new to this stuff, but I find it interesting. My assumption is that eBird is international,
Yes.
worldwide,
Yep.
and who contains the database or where, what?
Cornell.
I think so.
It's all
Well, no,
Cornell.
it's not all Cornell because they had to internationalize it.
Oh, okay.
And there are some countries that are not particularly cooperative with the United States.
Oh, okay.
But they're still participants in eBird. So I think it's being run by a consortium of like 4 or 5 countries now, each of which is storing everybody's data, which is also good from a backup perspective. People have tried to hack and destroy eBird because people are there's just nothing in it for them. To be horrible people, I guess. And so far, they've got really good IT, or the people who are doing it are dumb, which is possible. But never underestimate 14-year-olds living in their parents' basement. Some of them are geniuses, and they are working hard. But so far it's been resistant, and that backup is good. That it?
I just wanted to add, when you were showing the little purple areas and the hot spots and different things, when you open those up, you can actually look at the list that people generated, what dates they had them and everything.
Yep.
Also, if it's a recent entry, it'll show up as red. So you can tell that was in,
Depending on the version of eBird you have on the computer you have. Now, any phone app that's working, but I noticed that at work,
oh,
my computer is not running the same as my computer at home. So what they did was they switched, they made red, it used to be that blue meant personal site and red meant hotspot. Then they switched it, so anything blue, if it's a big blue thing, it's a hotspot. If it's a little blue thing, it's a personal spot. And the data is more than a year old, is that right? Something like a year?
I think so, yeah.
And if it's a little red spot, it's a personal spot, but there's been data in the last year, and if it's a big red spot, it's a hotspot, there's been data within the last year, so they've turned it into a timing thing. But as usual, when you try to shift an enormous database from one system of coding, color coding, not coding, but color coding to another, it doesn't go perfectly. So anybody who's trying to work with the new version of Word or Excel or probably knows a little bit about what I'm talking about right there. But yeah, so that's something to be aware of. Kind of look at what the description says too, because off to the side it tells you which version is being used. Thanks, guys. Get back to this.